The shooting range on the edge of town was quiet that morning. The air smelled faintly of gunpowder, mixed with a taint of oil from freshly cleaned rifles. Targets hung neatly in their lanes, little paper silhouettes waiting to be punched with holes. It was a Saturday, which meant the usual mix of weekend enthusiasts, a middle-aged accountant's plain cowboy with their pistols, college kids trying out their first trentals, and one or two serious marksmen practicing in solitude. And then there was the old man. He sat alone at the farthest lane, lane 12, the one where the lighting was dimmer and fewer people bothered to go. He looked as though he had wandered in from another time. A thin, wiry frame, steel gray hair hidden under a faded baseball cap, a weather jacket hanging loosely from his shoulders. His gear was modest, a small duffel, a pair of earmuffs that looked older than most of the shooters in the room, and an ancient bolt-action rifle. He wasn't fast, he wasn't flashy, he didn't talk to anyone. He just loaded one round at a time, and every shot landed dead center. No one paid him much attention except for a young man 3 lanes down. That young man was Jack Ramirez, fresh out of Bud's orientation, one of the newest recruits in the Navy SEAL pipeline. At 19, Jack was lean, restless, and brimming with the kind of energy only found in those too young to fully grasp the cost of war. He had grown up idolizing the teams, dreaming of glory, and now, even though training had barely begun, he already carried himself with a swagger. Jack had been practicing with his 9mm, double-tapping paper targets, when his eyes drifted toward the old man. At first, he was just curious why bother with a bolt-action rifle in a modern range full of semi-autos and R platforms, but then he noticed something else. When the old man reached to adjust his sleeve, the cuff of his jacket slid back, just for a second. That's when Jack saw it. A tattoo, faded with age, etched into leathery skin, a trident, the unmistakable Navy SEAL insignia. Jack froze. He blinked, wondering if his eyes were playing tricks. He leaned a little closer, pretending to adjust his stance, just to get another look. Sure enough, it was there. Not fresh ink, but old, the kind sailors had gotten back when tattoos were less fashion and more declaration. The old man reloaded, lifted the rifle to his shoulder, and fired again. Bullseye. Jack's heart raced. He had to say something. The approach. Jack set his pistol down, removed his ear protection, and wandered toward lane 12. He rehearsed a line in his head, casual, respectful, but not too eager. "Excuse me, sir," he said finally, standing just outside the lane. The old man didn't move right away. He cycled the bolt, checked his chamber, and only then glanced up. His eyes were sharp, blue-gray, like storm clouds that had seen more than one war. "Yes?" the man asked. His voice was calm but carried weight, like gravel underfoot. I couldn't help noticing your tattoo," Jack stammered. "That's a SEAL trident, isn't it?" The old man studied him for a moment, then looked back at his rifle. "Used to be," he said quietly. Jack swallowed. "Sir, I just got into the pipeline, Bud. I'm hoping to earn that trident myself one day." For a long moment, the only sound was the faint hum of ventilation fans and the muffled cracks of distant gunfire. The old man finished loading another round, lifted the rifle, and put another hole dead center. Then he set the rifle down and looked at Jack again. "You boys still call it earning, huh?" he said. "Yes, sir." The old man chuckled softly, though it wasn't amusement so much as memory. "Good. That's the only way it should be." The conversation. Jack leaned against the divider, unsure how much to press. He didn't want to intrude, but this wasn't something you stumbled across every day. "May I ask, when did you serve?" The old man considered him, as if measuring whether he deserved the answer. Then he shrugged. "Vietnam, long time ago." Jack's eyes widened. He had read about the early days of the teams, back when missions were written on paper, not computers, and when gear was little more than ingenuity and grit. "Were you a Broken Bar Team 1 or Team 2? Jack asked carefully. "Team 2, the old man said. Jack let out a low whistle. "That's incredible. You guys practically wrote the book." The old man gave a small smile, though it was tinged with something darker. "We didn't write a book. We just tried to come home in one piece." Jack didn't know what to say to that. He shifted awkwardly. "I'm sorry, sir, I don't mean to pry. It's just he hesitated, then pushed forward. I joined because I wanted to be part of something bigger. To test myself, to serve the best way I can. The old man nodded slowly. That's good, but you'll learn something, son. The trident isn't about you. It's about the man next to you, and sometimes, it's about the man who doesn't make it home. His eyes grew distant, as though he were looking at ghosts only he could see. The story. Jack remained silent, sensing the weight of the moment. The old man sighed, then leaned back against the booth. Back in '72, I was part of a recon team sent deep into the jungle, just 4 of us. Our job was to confirm a supply route the NVA were using. Simple, they said. In and out, but nothing's ever simple. His voice slowed, deliberate. We got compromised on day 2. Ambush. My best friend took a round to the chest. We tried to drag him out, but he had a broken bar. He knew he wasn't going to make it. He made us leave him, said he'd hold them off. Bought us 10 minutes, long enough to get clear. I can still hear him, laying down fire as we pulled away. Then it stopped. The old man's hands trembled slightly as he picked up a spent casing from the table. He rolled it between his fingers like a coin. Never saw him again. But every time I come here, every time I fire a round, I think about him. I imagine he's still out there, covering our backs. Jack's throat tightened. The bravado he'd carried into the range seemed small now, childish. I'm sorry, Jack whispered. The old man nodded. Don't be. Just remember, when you wear the trident, you're carrying more than your own pride. You're carrying the memory of every man who wore it before you, the ones who made it home a broken bar and the ones who didn't. The lesson. Jack stayed there for nearly an hour. He asked questions about training in the old days, about gear, about how the teams had changed. The old man answered some, avoided others. He never bragged, never dramatized. His stories were simple, heavy with truth. At one point, Jack asked, "Do you ever regret it?" Serving? The old man looked at him sharply. Not for a second. But I regret every brother I couldn't bring home. Jack nodded. Finally, the old man began packing up his rifle. His movements were careful, precise, like rituals honed over decades. Listen, son, he said. You've got heart. But heart alone won't get you through. It's the quiet things, a discipline, humility, knowing when to shut your mouth and listen. That's what makes a SEAL. Jack straightened, taking the words like gospel. Thank you, sir. I'll remember that. The old man slung his duffel over his shoulder. Before he left, he paused and studied Jack one last time. You remind me of him, you know, my friend. Same fire in the eyes. Do me a favor when it gets hard, when you think you can't go another step. Think of the ones who never quit. That's how you learn it. Then he walked out, leaving only the faint scent of gun oil and the echo of his footsteps. Aftermath. Jack stood there for a long time, staring at Lane 12. Later, when he went back to his barracks, he looked around at the other recruits laughing, bragging, complaining about workouts, and he felt different. Not better, just a broken bar sobered. He realized he hadn't just met an old man at the shooting range. He had shaken hands with history, with sacrifice, with the living embodiment of what he hoped to become. And for the first time, Jack truly understood. The trident wasn't about glory. It wasn't about proving herself. It was about honoring the quiet old men who still carried the weight of battles long past. It was about never letting them down. Epilogue. Months later, during a particularly brutal stretch of training, a cold, exhausted, muscles screaming, Jack thought about quitting. He was knee-deep in freezing surf, instructor shouting in his ear, body begging him to stop. And then he remembered Lane 12. He remembered the faded tattoo, the steady hands, the voice that spoke of sacrifice and brotherhood. And he heard the old man's words again. When you think you can't go another step, think of the ones who never quit. So Jack didn't quit. And when, years later, he finally earned his trident, he carried it not for himself, but for every man who came before, especially one quiet old man at a shooting range, who had reminded him what it truly meant to be a SEAL.